Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. It's Funmi, Principal Attorney speaking. Today's review is going to be on Huawei's cookie notice. So we're going to be looking at what type of representations they place on their site for consumers such as myself, and also look at the process flow on how they deal with cookies within the organization. Now, one thing that I want to talk about with people that watch these videos, there are external privacy documentations and there are internal privacy documentations. What we generally look at on this site is the external privacy documentation that an organization gives to its consumers. There are also internal documentation that generally only Privacy Counsel will review. Both documentations and the representations need to align. Now, we have the cookie banner here. Okay, we're going to find out more. I just clicked on this and it led me back to the same page we were on. I'm just going to click it again so you guys can see. Okay, so what I was expecting when I clicked find out more was a preference center. Now that might be below with Huawei, but ultimately the process flow when a consumer lands on a site, particularly when cookies are going to be utilized to improve the site and my experience, I should be presented with a preference center that allows me to opt out of any cookies that are not necessary for the site to function. Now, I don't know what cookies are applicable because this is the first time I've looked at this page. And I just want organizations and consumers to know what companies are doing, and then also from a business perspective, how a business is going to be able to comply generally and what different organizations are doing when it comes to cookie compliance under the data protection laws. So I just wanted to scroll to the bottom to see if there was a date this was last updated. Huawei hasn't provided a date on the representations that it's placed on its site. So that offers me two questions as a consumer. Is the usage of cookies by Huawei indicative of how cookies are used in 2025? That's my first question. The second question is, if there are any changes, at one point is a consumer meant to be made aware of the changes on how cookies are used? Okay. The second thing I want to take a look at is see, is there an opportunity for me to manage the cookies directly from the Huawei website? So it looks like the version of the website that I'm looking at is the .com website. I don't know if Huawei has other websites that they offer based on geography. Because I'm accessing this site from the United States, it may be that Huawei has different iterations of its website to accommodate for its obligations under different data protection laws. Now, in the United States, companies like Huawei have the obligation to allow me to opt out of the use of cookies as I interact with the site. And I'm going to scroll back to the top because I want us to look at each provision directly. But what I can make mention of is the language used here: by continuing to browse our site, you accept our cookie policy. I don't know if this language is applicable in 2025 given the changes in the data protection laws. Now, another thing that companies need to be aware of is how cookies are utilized by an organization are generally influenced by a number of different things. One, what the business is doing internally, and secondly, what the law requires of them. And those laws are constantly either increasing or they're changing. And in addition to looking at the laws, companies have the obligation to look at opinions that are being provided by certain regulatory bodies, because those opinions also influence how an organization has to run its privacy program to include how cookies are utilized and the process flow in maintaining its obligation to processing cookies under the data protection law. This language is very interesting to me. So we have a definition of what a cookie is. It's a text file stored by the web browser on a computer or mobile device, and the content of the cookie can be retrieved and read only by the server that created the cookie. Cookies are unique to the browser or mobile application you're using. So just off of this sentence, we already know that the cookie can identify us as an individual because they're unique to the browser or mobile application that we're using. So the fact that a cookie is personal data means that a company like Huawei needs to be transparent about how that cookie is being used, right? Sometimes Huawei stores cookies on computers or mobile devices for the purpose of improving a user experience, including these scenarios. So it's interesting. We can see Huawei has technical cookies, personalization cookies, advertising cookies, statistical, and social media cookies. Interesting that they said you can manage or delete the cookies at your own preference, but we weren't presented with a preference center. For details, visit aboutcookies.org. You can clear all the cookies stored on your computer, and most current web browsers provide the option of blocking cookies. What should really happen in practice, we should be presented with a preference center, because what's happening is Huawei has presented this cookie banner stating that my continued usage of browsing the site means I accept the cookie policy. But I don't have the opportunity to opt out of cookies like the advertising cookies that I might not necessarily want Huawei to use and collect information about me and my online activities. I need to be presented with the opportunity to opt out, and it has to be as easy as it was for me to opt in. I should be given the opportunity to withdraw just as easily. So it was easy for them to present this cookie banner, and it was easy for them to state, by continuing to browse our site, you accept our cookie policy. So it was easy for them to opt me in, right? It should be just as easy for me to opt out, but it's not. The only opportunity that we've been presented is to click on aboutcookies.org or to go to the browsers here. That's not as easy as it was for them to opt me in for certain cookies to be collected as I interact with the site, which from a data protection standpoint can be seen as non-compliant depending on the geography. Now, there are lots of details that are missing when I do these reviews. I can only opine based on the provisions that a company provides on their public-facing documents, and then based on the size of the organization. For my reviews, I don't go into detail about, what the revenue size is, geographies where they operate. That's not insight that I have, which is why at the beginning of this video, I had mentioned internal privacy documentation and external privacy documentation. There's lots of details that us as consumers don't have when we look at websites like Huawei's and other global organizations, but we can only opine based on usage by organizations of the smartphones, wearables, and PCs. I presume that globally, Huawei is selling its products, whether it's through a distributor or it's through them directly. I don't know that specifically, but that's definitely a question that I would have for my clients. They need to provide me a lot of insights into how their business runs in order for me to give them good legal advice on what their public-facing documents need to look like, and then also the internal documents too. So many web browsers provide a do not track function that can release do not track requests to websites. Currently, major internet standardization organizations have not established policies to specify how websites should handle these requests. If you enable do not track or other similar functions your browser may provide, Huawei will not change the way we collect and use your data as described in this statement. However, we reserve the right to respond to your do not track request and stop the collection of your data without prior notice to you. Now, I don't have very much to say about this because I don't have those insights about geography. My determination for a company that I'm working with on the do not track obligations is going to be influenced by the details that I generally have on my intake form. So I like to read the provisions because it's interesting to see how global organizations are navigating their obligations in all the geographies where they provide their goods and services. But each provision generally needs to be reviewed by a privacy lawyer to ensure that a company is not misrepresenting their privacy practices to their consumers. Now, I'm not going to go too much into all of the laws that apply, but under the FTC Act Section 5, organizations have the obligation to not use unfair or deceptive practices. And what the FTC constitutes as deceptive could be information that is outdated, that needs to be updated based on what a company is doing internally. Now, that's why it's really important for companies to put the dates on which they are or have updated their public-facing documents, because that will influence whether or not a company like Huawei has looked at their obligations based on the date that their public-facing documents were last updated. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you're looking for privacy counsel, take a look at my description and I'll see you in another review.